As somebody that closely follows population and demographic statistics, I can say that I'm definitely looking forward to the 2020 decennial census. We've been running on fumes and estimations for nearly a decade now, and as the ridiculous predictions of Africa's future population show, there's only so far you can push trends. Say what you will, the idea that Nigeria would have a population of 1.5 billion by 2100 is ridiculous. That works the other way, too. Fertility has dropped by 3% in Nigeria recently, so in continuing that trend, we could come to the conclusion that there'd eventually be no new children born in Nigeria, or use increasing life expectancy to speculate that Nigerians will live to be hundreds or thousands of years old by the 2050s. The point I'm trying to make is that there's only so far you can extrapolate trends into the future before entering the world of fiction. While the level to which trends rise and fall varies, population and demographic data can really only be considered effective for 10 or 15 years. Which brings me back to the main topic, the 2020 census. Now, while all the decennial censuses of the last 50 years have all had a somewhat unique logo to make their respective census visually distinct, the 2020 census essentially just reuses the one for the 2010 census, the only real change being the color of the letters. Now, I'll admit that the need for different logos and fonts for each census is pretty pointless and can sometimes be a bit ridiculous. Case in point, the 1970 decennial census. But I always enjoyed the different flavored texts, useless as they may be, so I hope we see a return to them in the 2030 census. The biggest real change from censuses of the past is actually significant. People care this time. Usually it's just political scientists trying to gauge how many new seats each state will gain or lose, but it's different this time. There's genuine debate over how it should be conducted. What questions should be on the census, how many should each household get, that kind of stuff. While it's nice to see a larger interest in the topic in general, you also get the impression that not all of these people really know what they're talking about, mostly want to use the census as something to use as a political tool, completely defeating the purpose. For instance, many people are advocating for the addition of the question, "Are you a legal citizen of the United States?" or "Are you an illegal immigrant?" or something to that effect, which to me sounds nonsensical, regardless of your political affiliation. Place yourself in the shoes of an illegal immigrant. Why would you ever say yes if the government asks you if you're an illegal immigrant? Such a question would lead to virtually nobody checking that box, and a number which is supposedly backed by the U.S. Census Bureau being vastly too small and completely inaccurate. This ties into the broader point that census should be in no way politicized. It's an attempt to find the most accurate possible numbers for population and demographics of the people of the United States. If it's not entirely objective, there's no point. As somebody who's followed population trends for some time, I think I can predict with some degree of accuracy the results of the census, but don't expect these to be totally pinpoint accurate. First, and I think this one is pretty obvious, the Southwest, in this instance meaning Texas, California, New Mexico, and Arizona, will grow enormously. This is a pretty safe one, both Latin American and interstate immigration funneling huge numbers of people into this area. It's safe to say each state will gain at least one seat, except for California, which will probably stay the same. Texas has the best of this, gaining a huge amount of newcomers from other regions of the U.S. as well as Latin America. They also have a fairly high fertility rate, so it seems pretty clear that their population will swell. A slightly less obvious call is that the South will have grown much larger since the 2010 census. Good economic outlook and high levels of interstate immigration play out in their favor, particularly in Georgia and Florida. But this effect is even apparent, though to a lesser extent, in the poorer states such as Mississippi and Alabama. The Northeast will continue to experience negative interstate migration, as will the Midwest, though to a much lesser extent. The states to look out for this census are definitely Texas, as mentioned earlier, Florida, and though this is a bit out there, North Dakota. Their oil boom and continued, though somewhat slow, urban expansion will definitely see some gains in terms of population. I also see Colorado, Arizona, and Georgia doing fairly well. And that's basically it. This census is definitely going to be an interesting one to see how things turn out, but I hope it doesn't get too heavily politicized to remain accurate.